Welcome to Tune In and Find the Others. We are tuning in and we are finding another human here that's changing their world, that's looking into the ways in which they can affect their own community, or they can capture moments that can shift the perspective of what is broadcasted by mainstream sources. So this is Emma Sron, and we are here to talk about all the ways in which she's capturing things with her photography. She's a journalist, and all the different projects that she's been a part of, the alternative media that is, kind of that's like not the CNN, not the MSNBC, the way that we can talk about real things that matter, real things that are going on without the influence of propaganda. So, Emma, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm okay. Um, well, yeah, I'm a lot of things because it's Monday. I have a 2 week rotation with my kids right now, and I just dropped them off with their dad yesterday. So today is
Mm.
always a weird day. So I'm actually kind of like
So just
slow
kind of like
today.
going back into your own life and
Yes, it's
trying to
weird.
figure out how best do I live my life in
Yes,
these times now.
yes, because it's a big shift from the constant movement and noise and uh, doing things with and for other people to having all my time. And I'm like, time is passing. What do I do? so,
Mm.
so today is always a funny day when people are like, "How are you?" I'm like, I don't even know yet.
Yeah, that's relatable. Honestly, that's because, well, me being in Dominica right now, there's a lot of like, um, I'm going back in less than 2 weeks, and this balance of like, I have a lot of free time, so it's like kind of uncomfortable because I
Yeah,
have to try to figure out. Okay, so I have to figure out things for when I'm going home. I want to stay up with what's going on in the world, but also like I want to just like get into self practices. So it's been a shift going from a farm and then coming to where I'm staying now in Dominica. Um, so I understand uh, what you may be feeling.
transition. Yes, just
Yeah, you
yeah,
just kind of we got to adapt to
yes,
every, and especially with like the changing world and everything that's going
yeah,
on. There's always like, especially for activists and people that are trying to shift uh, awareness on what's continuously happening. Um, we have to always adapt to the given situation, and sometimes it's really hard to know how to navigate um, the current dialogue, because there's either so much propaganda, or there's something like, there's a word that has become a trigger word, that we have to kind of avoid or figure out.
yep.
How has that all been for you, trying to adapt to the changing like political climate, um, just the environment of where uh, just activism is today?
That's a huge thing. Oh my gosh, just thinking about the past like year specifically, or I guess if I went back all the way to the beginning, uh, just a little bit after 2020 started, I was paying attention to what was happening in China with the pandemic, probably a lot sooner than a lot of people were having working in independent media. Like, a lot of us are paying attention to things that are happening all over the world a lot more than the average person is, which is just what it is. It doesn't mean that we're like uh, smarter. Like, I never want to come across as like I was paying attention to this before
Right.
other people. It's just part of the job and like part of what a lot of us just do, even when it's not related to a job. Now we're just used to
Yeah.
paying attention to things, and uh, so sort of towards the beginning of that, I was paying a lot of attention and started. reporting on it mostly with, I was working with the Mind Unleashed at the time, and I was writing there about it a bit, and recording videos myself. And then it just got like politicized so quickly that I took a step back from recording the videos because I was not prepared for, sort of like the outside, the opinions of people and the input and the
Mm,
division that started happening really, really
on both
quickly.
sides.
Yes, all across the board, no matter what you would say. But then I live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, which is, where George Floyd was murdered. So, um, when that happened and that, uprising started, I'm a photographer and a photojournalist. And so I got out there right away. And I also, started live streaming that stuff. So that became my life all of a sudden. So it was like paying attention to pandemic nonstop. And everybody's like stuck inside their house for however long. And then all of a sudden, everybody comes out of their house because this crazy thing is happening and the streets are filled with
Mm,
people and things are burning. And it's just like, was crazy. Um, and really everything that's happened since then, it's kind of been like nonstop stuff since, like intense stuff since January
mm-hmm.
2020, really, for me. And uh, I don't even know how much I've had a chance to like sit down and think about it and like reflect about like everything that has happened and everything that I've seen.
Yeah.
Um, and during that time, like on each of the major topics that have happened, there's been, uh, people who get it, and then people who are so emotional and angry about the topics too, and the way that so many of us have had to be like a way more careful or picky about the way that we communicate about certain things, which I think a lot of us in independent media have experienced for years now because of, censorship, because of like the tech platforms and, getting fact checked and like rated by NewsGuard and all this kind of stuff. But now it's really bled into like individual people, like our, you know, how after 9/11, a bunch of stuff, well, a bunch of stuff changed. um, and we started hearing that phrase, if you see something, say something. Like they sort
Mm,
of
mm-hmm.
transferred the, whatever, onto individuals, like watch your neighbor, watch this stuff, like if you see something that's not right, say something. And that's kind of where we're at, I feel like, now with all kinds of topics. It's like transferred over to individual people to be feeling like they're the ones who are trying to hold people accountable for what they think is propaganda or something they shouldn't be talking about or something they shouldn't be saying. So it's even harder to talk about a lot of things now because
Yeah.
it's not just big tech censorship and all that. It's like people too, and
Well,
it,
that makes it
ugh,
really easy to control a narrative or control a population is when you're not having to do all the work. You can just
exactly.
kind of extradite that work to all these people that are just on the ground in their own communities, so they police each other.
Yeah, and they seem like ready and willing to do it too, which
Yeah.
is weird. Or like not everybody, but there's some people that are like, oh, here's the next thing we have to do, and they're like on their keyboards and looking for people in their family that they think are right. It's a I don't like the way that feels. It's an
Yeah,
unsettling time.
definitely. And there is a level of compassion that I have for it too, because it's like people are looking at, like, people aren't necessarily malice. They're not trying to like hurt other people unless it's like I think there's a in our society uh we're very traumatized, and so a bit of the way that some of us try to get through our traumatization is by hurting other people, but we're just trying to get our needs met.
Hmm.
That's not to justify it at all, but I'm trying to find a level of compassion for like some of these people that want to, you know, signal to the authorities, hey, this person is doing this thing. And
Hmm.
like you've said that like uh, that's a way that can help you, like that can help everyone. It's this whole idea that we're helping everyone be safer, everyone be healthier. um so it's difficult to navigate,
Yeah.
um because you don't want to shame people, and that's
Hmm.
exactly what I feel like we're experiencing from, it's really both sides. There's so much
Yeah.
shame
Mhm.
on if you do this thing or if you don't do this thing,
Mhm.
look
Yeah.
between the lines, you can see what we're talking about. But um, so yeah, so for the whole like George Floyd thing, how was that? Because you were really in it.
Yeah. It's hard to describe because, well, I guess what was a little bit useful was like being kind of familiar with that sort of stuff. Like I hadn't necessarily covered that intense of a situation myself, but I have a lot of friends in independent media and friends that either live stream or get like video clips of things to report on it. So I've like watched their coverage of, like the yellow vests in France or what was happening in Hong Kong for a while. So I can't really imagine what it was like for people who have maybe never like seen stuff get like that before,
Mm,
and we're kind of thrust into it. And like I said, I didn't necessarily experience that intensive stuff myself before, but I've watched friends experience the police targeting journalists before and
yeah,
reporting through clouds of tear gas for day after day. And so it was just sort of like, oh, well, it's my turn now. But the weirdest part about it was it being somewhere familiar. I'm used to people
right in your
traveling. Like,
backyard.
yeah, like here's the thing. I'm gonna go fly across the country for it or whatever to go report on it. But it was like here. So I went,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna take some pictures of this library that has all the windows broken out of it. And my kids and I like went to a music story time thing there once. Or um,
Mm,
oh, there's buildings burning right here and there's police surrounding this clinic that I used to take my kids to. Like it's just really strange to have it happening in such familiar places. Um, but also that added such an interesting like emotional element to it because I knew the backstory, which I tried to get through when I was like live streaming and stuff that people who aren't from around here might not realize that we have Minneapolis and St. Paul are two cities right next to each other. There's an interesting
mhm.
dynamic with that. And then um, you might have heard of like well known or police murders that have gotten traction in national media that have happened in like St. Paul or in Minneapolis and not realize how close those are, that it's like the
Yeah,
same community experiencing this stuff. And we've
right.
had so many high profile ones in a short amount of time that have gotten national attention. And um, I've been kind of paying attention to that stuff since Jamar Clark was murdered by police in Minneapolis in 2015, because that happened really close to where I lived. And then the response to that was that a bunch of people for weeks occupied the street in front of the Minneapolis 4th Precinct. And it was
Wow.
November. Uh, and it spanned over Thanksgiving. So it was cold. There were tents set up everywhere. People had fires in the streets. On Thanksgiving Day, there was a massive Thanksgiving meal that people had in the street. It was really unique and really interesting for a horrible reason to be there, but the community really came together and did this thing that most people had never seen or experienced before. Um, and then after that, there's been like multiple police murders that have happened since that one, and not in the same way. The community hasn't come together and like occupied in that way, but they've always come together, and you'll see the families that have been affected by police violence come to the next thing and then to the next thing. And there's new organizations that have been created that are like just the family members that are helping each other through these things, which is like heartbreaking, but also really interesting and amazing to see, and not something that's ever in like the national media reporting on these things that they
Right.
talk kind of people in a certain way and what they're doing in a certain way, um, but getting to see the history of it for a while and then how it blew up so big with so many other people getting involved last summer after George Floyd was murdered was
Hmm.
it was all just really interesting, and still stuff that I'm probably kind of processing, because it got to a point where it was like every day there was stuff happening. There was like,
Right.
some days there were multiple protests, and it's still going. It's not as active as it had been. And the topics shift. We've had, unfortunately, more police murders in the metro area since then. And there's that have ended up getting some national attention, probably just because of what happened here last summer. But we've also got the Line 3 pipeline battle that's happening in Minnesota. And there's a lot of activism going on for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and also the Native children that are being found at the residential schools. There's always like stuff happening here, which is great, but also hard for people to take a break and to
Mm.
pause to think about it. I haven't been doing as much lately as I had in the past because I think I got up to a point where it just got to be, I was going and going and going and going, and I need to take a little bit of a break from being out all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have that like practice of, especially as we're going into a more chaotic world, to have practice of being in that all the time, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
take a break because it's not all happening right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as much as I mean, it is, but as far as like different layers of crisis as they unfold over the years, we're gonna need to be resilient. And I think having the ability to self-regulate and have
Mm-hmm.
our own breaks is going to be like really essential to give
Mm-hmm.
ourselves like what we need to be centered and grounded and have all of our needs met, and then be able to offer this footage of what's really going on, or put out a necessary article that's going to shift the perspective of people on what the major news networks are trying to portray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they've always got some sort of motivation that's you know sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not, sometimes you might just be assuming that it's there, but it's uh, there's usually something to counter in there in their
Right.
reporting of most things.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Is more conglomeration or more like monopolization of different of outlets. I think it's four or five right now
Mm-hmm.
that are
Yeah.
companies that really put out all of the media
Mm-hmm.
um, around. Is it around the globe, or is that was that just focused on the U.S., or is
That
that
was just focused here, except there are certain things that also the bigger umbrella does connect with other outlets overseas too.
right? So how did you get into activism or into like photojournalism to begin with?
uh I feel like everything I've gotten into it in a kind of roundabout way. Like it wasn't my plan. But when I trace back like activism related stuff, it kind of um is probably something that I've almost always paid attention to, like injustices or things that I don't think are right or something that doesn't seem fair. Like that was, I think most of us were like, well, when I was a kid, I cared about this thing, or like you could tell that you were like a little bit different. Like you paid attention to the less popular things or whatever. Um, and in high school, I think was the first time I actually got more involved, like realizing that like activism is a thing. And I protested in 2003, like a lot of people did, the big protests against the Iraq War. I lived in a suburb of Chicago, and I went downtown to Chicago for like the big anti-war protest that day, which was just massive and thousands of people. And I think my dad told me not to go downtown that day. but, but I did, because why wouldn't you go to that? And at the time, I was dating somebody who was in a band, and I was making like anti-war T-shirts and buttons to sell at the shows, and we had
Nice.
like anti-war like vigils, like candlelight things after some of the shows and stuff. So that's kind of when I like first started doing that kind of stuff. And I think my like focus of activism shifted for quite a while after that, back and forth. Like I wasn't super organized in my thinking of what's like the worst thing or the thing that I need to focus on more. How can I be helpful? Because in college, I went to school in Chicago, and for a little while, I was focusing on outreach to homeless people that lived in like certain areas of the city, and did that just a little bit. Um, so there's not like a ton of time for stuff in college when you're trying to work and go to your classes and stuff. And then I was kind of silly, and um, someone that I knew was telling people about something bad that was happening in Uganda, and I got like really involved in that because I thought it was just terrible. And now I realize that that's not, I'm just like a random person in the United States, and if something's happening bad across the country or across the world, it's okay to pay attention to it and to help and to tell people about it. But there were a lot of people at that time that were just young and kind of inexperienced, and everybody was like, we should go there, and like what are we
Mm. Mm-hmm.
so I ended up going, and I went to Uganda twice. And the first, I don't think I did anything exceptionally helpful while I was there, but the first time I went, I had some friends that were also going, but I was a camp counselor that summer, so they went before me, and they left the day after I got there. So I got there and they picked me up at the airport, but then they left the next day. So then I was pretty much there for like around a month, just like by myself, and just like it was cool. Like I had a good time, and I ended up spending some time at like a couple of children's homes, volunteering and just hanging out with the kids. But uh, it was just not something that I necessarily recommend people do now. Like just as a person from the U.S., you're not just gonna like go to another country. Not that I felt like I was gonna go and like fix things. It's just not the most productive use of time necessarily. But it was a good experience. Um, and then I think after that, I kind of did the whole like, oh, I got married and had kids, and got distracted by doing what you're supposed to do, and wasn't so much of an activist. Um, I think I still probably cared about things and did little things, but wasn't devoting my life so much to it until probably around when Jamar Clark was killed in 2015, and when Standing Rock happened. I went up there
Mm.
and I took my kids with me, and that's kind of when I just I couldn't ignore stuff anymore, and couldn't just be like, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to, and I have a house and kids and a dog. And I that was like probably more of a selfish period of time. But you had been talking a little bit about how you have sympathy for those people. Like you have more of an empathetic perspective of the people who are like uh, maybe report like the people who are doing the work of the elites in the ruling class a little bit more. And I kind of do. Well, I mean, I know I do, but kind of for that reason of knowing how I was able to fall into that sort of trap of like, this is how you're
Yeah.
supposed to live your life, and this is what you're supposed to do, and having no time to get outside of that, because we kind of get stuck in these just this like cycle
This is
of
just the
I
way. Yeah,
yes,
exactly. I was
there's
going to
no
say that the
time.
way it
Yes.
works.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you can't really
You have to
find
kind
the
of
time to
just
get out
fall
of it.
in.
Yeah. It's a big decision to jump into a life of like doing something different. It's not easy, and it's not
You're
always
going against the
fun.
grain.
Yes. And then you get like criticized for it too, because you're not being normal. But it's really hard for people to make that jump, because there is all of that like outside kind of influence, sort of like the more of the negativity that you get from society about living that kind of different life. But they also have us like stuck in that cycle of like you have to work a lot because you need to have like insurance, and you need to have this thing to pay for this thing, and like and you're bombarded by ads and things that are telling you that you want things and you need things, and the more of that you get, the more you have to work and spend your time to like get to that. And it's that cycle that like so many people get stuck in, and sometimes they need to be like shaken, or a big thing needs to happen to them for them to get out of it, or you just need to make that decision that my life's never going to be super comfortable now, but here I am. And so that's where I am now. And so now I'm kind of way different than I was before.
Yeah, you've kind of like, from my perspective, you're like a compassionate radical. You're like, it's funny you were saying like how what it takes for people to kind of jump out of that cycle, or like uh mouse
Yeah,
mouse
yeah, yeah,
wheel
in the
kind
wheel,
of
yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
um and how about 2020 for so many people all over the world that are not used to having their entire life, like every aspect of their life, just like
Yeah.
you have to pay attention now to, um or not, maybe not pay attention, you everything is unstable, and so you have to like keep your mental health in check, while also like nobody knows what's going on, like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like, and try
Yeah.
to support each other, and then also like
Yeah.
money for rent, or money like what, and like the federal government, and trying to figure all that out at a time when you know, it was the Trump era, and um geez, I mean, there 2020 was crazy, and 2021 has been really crazy too, but I think
Mhm.
that like, as far as like people, like, you don't jump out of the system, so to speak, unless something either traumatic happens, or something like something really shows you how messed up some aspects of the world really are,
Mhm.
or it like directly affects you. And I think for the pandemic, that's what happened to a bunch of people all at once,
Mhm.
like everybody all over the world. Maybe not some of the indigenous people in maybe Brazil, you know,
Mhm.
maybe they were living just fine and had no idea of the pandemic. You never know. But as far as the Western world, and I mean, I guess you can include the Eastern with China and all that. But yeah, it's been wild. It's
Mhm.
been wild.
Yeah. I feel like that was the thing for some people that like shook them enough to change their perspective a bit on things, but there's other people that I feel like are not in a place where they can do that yet, so they kind of even hunkered down more and like put their blinders
Mm,
on even more narrow. Like there's a lot of people that I think are really going through like a self-preservation thing right now. Like they can't acknowledge uh even that we have all those questions. Like they want to think that like no, I do know what's going on right now, because they don't have like the emotional and mental capacity necessarily. Like they're so stuck in that like gerbil wheel thing that like
yeah.
any little thing that gets in there could like suddenly make it stop, or like they could fall out or whatever, and they're just like hunkering down in all all of like their beliefs and like following, I guess, like the mainstream narrative and stuff, because it's just like easier to kind of like trust that that's right and that there's an end here and we'll get there and everything will be fine, because anything else they're just not prepared. And I guess maybe that's a benefit to some of us that have chosen to live a bit of a different, more like activist kind of lifestyle or something, that we're like used to the ups and downs, and that like something might
Mm,
come in and throw off everything that you thought was right. Like it's not, that's not unusual, and kind of having that past experience or knowing that something like that might happen makes you that much more prepared for
yeah.
kind of everything that might be coming from here. Like a lot of people aren't, they might have like their big houses with all their like stuff in it, but they're not like mentally prepared and they don't have the experience to pick things up if they kind of fall apart, or to if the narrative completely shifts sometime. I don't know what's going to happen to people like that, like how they're going to deal with it, but I guess we might
Yeah, because I
see.
think a lot of people that maybe have a certain amount in their bank account, or have a really nice house with all these, they have food for months, or you know whatnot, they may not have really been affected that much.
Yeah.
by these things, but you look at, people, I mean, most of I think it's 50% or 60% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the exact number, but I mean, for a lot of the people that are living in, straight up poverty, it's like they're kind of just like at the whim of the government to do something. And if the government didn't do something, then they had to figure it out themselves with as little money as they had. And like, it's amazing that, I mean, I don't I don't want people to have to be resilient, but it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing that people found a way to, like, it just inspires me that there's always a psychological, or like, maybe it's like even like a tribal, or like a um, archaic like drive, like, okay, nobody's going to come and help, like,
Mm-hmm.
I have to figure this out. I have to reach out to my neighbor. We have to band together. We
Mm-hmm.
have to figure this out together. And you've been involved in, we're having Ida hit New
Yeah.
Orleans right now, and you were involved, um, with, when it was Hurricane Maria
Harvey.
came through, or it was
Or
Harvey.
Harvey
Okay.
hit Houston. That was where I did the most of stuff.
So you helped out with, a lot of the on the grounds, uh, uh, when the National Guard wasn't as prepared as some of the people that, or the activists, or the people that came together on the ground and helping out, and that's like, that's one of those things that that trigger of like, okay, like, we have to do this, or maybe nobody else is going to. That like
Yes.
inspiration and like getting in there and doing it, I think is like really beautiful. um and yeah, I mean, what do you have any experiences to share from that situation?
um that so much stuff happened in a short period of time that even like looking back on it, I don't even know how long that whole experience was. Like, was it a week? Was it like, I don't know, because it was lots of sleepless nights, all in a row. And but I'll give like a short version of the story so your listeners understand what happened. But um so Hurricane Harvey was coming to Texas, and I don't remember why exactly. I think it something gave me like a gut feeling that Houston was going to flood really badly if the storm kind of stalled or if it was slow. And so that it was coming in later at night. And so I thought, well, I'm going to stay up tonight and just kind of see what happens, because I can't shake this feeling that like this isn't going to be very good.
You said you were living there at the
No,
time?
no, I was actually here in Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And so I just stayed up and was watching basically Twitter and Facebook. I was searching for like Houston and Harvey as I was paying attention to things. And I started seeing people posting that floodwaters were rising really, really fast. And then people were very quickly saying, like, I'm in my attic or I'm on my roof and I can't get through to the police. 911 is a busy signal or they're not answering. And then I was able to see that, like, um, some of their phone systems were like down, and things were not working the way that they were supposed to. And um, right away, as they usually say, they were saying this last night in for the hurricane as it was hitting New Orleans, that like, oh, we can't go out to rescue people until it's safe for our people to do that. But in the meantime, you've got people who are panicking and they're like, it's me and my two kids and this, that. And I couldn't just like keep seeing these posts and like go past them. So I started collecting the information on them. And somehow, I don't know what the time frame was like because this was happening overnight, but I started collecting that stuff and putting it into a spreadsheet, and I made a Google form. Um, for people to put in their information if they needed to be rescued, if they were unable to get through to the emergency services, and started connecting with people all over the country that were also paying attention to this, who helped me manage the Google Sheets that we were making. We sort of quickly were able to connect with some people on the ground that had boats, and that were willing to go rescue people, and also with the Cajun Navy, who had a great big network. And we, over the next like day or so, we had more people join us who joined like the dispatch team. So we would have people looking for the people that needed to be rescued, and sharing the form everywhere, and also just sharing resources when people were posting that they needed things. And then they'd go into our spreadsheet that we then had linked up to a map. And the map was a map of Houston, and there'd be like a different color dot for if it's somebody that is also having a medical emergency and they need to be rescued immediately. And it would have all the information. It's 2 adults, 3 kids, whatever. And we also got their phone numbers so that we could text them. Do you still need to be rescued? Has your situation worsened? And then we could update our stuff. And then the dispatchers would connect with the different people with boats. And eventually the U.S. Coast Guard ended up contacting us, because they heard about our map. And I think one other map that somebody else had done something really similar. There were a couple of people who did something almost the same thing at the exact same time,
Nice.
which is cool. But the Coast Guard ended up taking our maps and like overlaying it on their maps for their rescue efforts. And I got a glimpse. They like let me log in to look at what their maps looked like with like our overlays on top of it. And they basically told us, kind of once things were a little bit more calm, that those of us that did something like that will like revolutionize the way that they do rescue efforts going forward, because they've never crowdsourced rescue information on the internet in that way. I probably just followed like what the authorities say, like, oh, the police, we got these 911 calls in this place, so we need you to go, that like that kind of thing.
Wow.
And Facebook and Twitter were just, and probably other places too, were just overloaded with posts of people saying, this is where I am, this is my address, this is who I am, I need to be rescued. Because that's all they could think to do if the 911 didn't work.
Which is actually what's happening in New Orleans right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of I get it, that's sort of like the natural place that people go if they feel like they can't get help. Where else are you going to go? Especially if your family is also in the area. They can't help you because they're experiencing the same thing. You need to tell someone that you need help. And so that was just a really crazy experience. And we ended up rescuing, I don't even know how many people in the end. If like the few of us that first night or that next day didn't have the thought to start collecting this information and try to help people, like more people would have died. Like it's just, if we wouldn't have done that, I hate to think what would have happened. And being, it's crazy that I was in Minnesota when that happened, that you can be that far away and be that helpful. Even with no experience doing something like that before. If you see something that's wrong and you put your mind to it, you can do something that's amazing. And experiencing something like that taught me a lot about people helping people. Of course, I knew that was a thing before, but like not to the extent that I experienced it then. And the experience of all those people too, who for a while after that, most people were rescued, but then it turns into recovery efforts where like people's houses are full of mold. They need assistance. People that maybe didn't need to be rescued, but they're in their moldy house now and they don't have any diapers or they don't have any insulin. Like it's not, there's the thing that happens and then there's a long thing that happens after that too, where people need help for a really long time. And so in the moment, it doesn't always happen this way, but like the state's services completely failed people during Houston, um, during Harvey in Houston, and then afterwards, most people who have been through some sort of big disaster in the US have not good things to say about like FEMA and their experience with the Red Cross and stuff. Um, I I knew that, but then I saw it so much more in the feedback that we were getting from people that like I applied for this, I requested this, and I got turned down. My house is full of mold, and I got turned down for like what FEMA was giving people $200, or like it wasn't even a lot of something, but
Wow.
they were constantly being denied, or it was taking so long, and just the red tape and the hoops that you have to jump through when you're dealing with um, government organizations and like nonprofits that are really, they've gotten so up there that they're really just kind of hand in hand with the government organizations,
Mm-hmm.
that they've red taped themselves so much into like a little web that they're less helpful because it's, oh, we can't help you in that way because we have to do this first, or like this, and so seeing the
Yeah.
way that like individual
Make it
people can come,
official.
yes, and we see that all the time with all kinds of like, that's not just with like rescue and relief stuff, but that that happens with like all kinds of um more like government organizations and services and stuff, but being able to really see how people can come together and help each other and don't have those problems in the way. They're like, I'm here, I have a boat, that person needs to be saved, I'm going to go there. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
if it's outside of my whatever. It doesn't matter that it's still uh the wind speed is still whatever. Like they're just going to do it because they want to save somebody, and they don't have this like checklist and red tape, um and I know that everybody that also experienced that being saved by civilians, the people that are, whenever there's a big storm or a flood down south and the Cajun Navy saves people, they have that experience where people came to save them. It wasn't the
Yeah.
government, it wasn't whatever, that it's people that are more likely to have your back. um,
Mm.
and I think that's a really important lesson, and hopefully opens people's eyes, more than just like natural disasters and stuff, that it's kind of like that across the board, and all kinds of things that like individual people are probably a little bit more reliable and potentially more helpful.
Yeah, it kind of breaks down this idea of my neighbors, like, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust like that somebody is going to like support me in times of crisis, or this idea that humans are inherently selfish. But
Yeah.
we've learned from crises like this, like that you experienced, helping down there, that more generally people are helping each other. People are willing and wanting to just like, what do you need? How can I assist you?
Mm-hmm.
And like communities banding together. The George Floyd thing,
Mm-hmm.
people, communities banding together and supporting mothers that have lost their sons or their
Mm-hmm.
daughters or whatever. Uh, it's amazing that a story like that, and I want to congratulate you and just like send so much love to you for like what you did and how many people you could have saved, and the not just like the lives saved, but like the quality of life, and also the psychological change of people recognizing that, man, it was just people that came together. And I have
Mm-hmm.
a story from Grand Rapids of, during the pandemic, we had a bunch of people that became homeless,
Mm-hmm.
and they were in a park in Grand Rapids. They decided to tent up in that park,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a government service that was like, trying to get people to, into a building that was run by a, certain religious organization, and everyone was going to be like closely packed together. And the people that were newly homeless and that have been homeless were like, or houseless, were like, we don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're fine being outside. Like
Mm-hmm.
just leave us be. And then it's it there was I was I'm friends with somebody that's involved in one of the uh, social working people that reach out to the youth that are houseless and try to get them into houses or support their needs in some way, get them to have identification, or get them credit or whatever they need.
Mhm.
And there was this there was this group of um, like it was a few firefighters and it was all police officers that were designated with COVID money by the city to handle the people that were in the tents
Mhm.
in in that in that park, and um, and kind of shutting out the people that had been reaching out to them, that had been actually
Mhm.
helpful to them this entire time and had
Yeah.
relationships with them. And
Yep.
here you have this group of people that have guns on them
Mhm.
that look like police officers that are um that don't have, like, they didn't have a net, or they didn't have like a spreadsheet of all these people and their names and like all this
Mhm.
stuff, and um we're like booking people that had warrants,
Mhm.
and then shoving people away that they started sweeping everybody
Yep.
and shoving them in another part of the city where it's more
Mhm.
convenient or it looks nicer.
Yep.
um and so it was a pure example. So many people were irate in our
Mhm.
community, and it was like, man. And here you have like these people on the ground. I can name like 5, 6, 7 people that were involved with reaching out to these people and finding out where they scattered off to
Mhm.
make sure that they're okay and they have their needs met.
Yeah.
Um, and they formed, a collective together to work together. There are several like different on the ground organizations that like started connecting with each other, started using Telegram or started using like other lines of communication, um, communicating where these people were and
Mhm.
like if they wanted help, if they needed
Yeah.
help. um, and uh, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what people can do together. Because Grass, the community that I'm a part of in Grand Rapids Autonomous Support System, it's not a nonprofit. It's not a
Yep.
non-government organization or
Yeah.
anything like that. It's literally just people for 6 years have come together
Mhm.
to like support one another and do different events and stuff. So this kind of what you're describing, of this idea that people coming together in community and addressing community needs more often than not is more successful than
Yep.
people in government that are either paid to be in that position, or they have donors, or they have some kind of people to make sure that they're supporting before they actually support the people and all the red tape and such.
Mhm.
So it's a I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I feel like this it's that awareness, I think, is good for shifting our perspective on how to address the crises that we experience
Mhm.
in the United States. But as time moves forward, you know, um, who knows what's going to be the next crisis?
Yeah, and like we might lose some of that is already set up on the government end of things. If things get really bad, some of that stuff might just be gone, um, which is a bad. It's not a nice thing to think about. But we could get to that point. But you're right that just people helping people has more like better lasting impact because you have the potential to really change people in a different way because you're doing this because you care, not because it's your job, not because you're following the rules. And I forgot who first said this to me, but I know of somebody who refers to them as the nonprofit industrial complex
Yeah.
because it's not what it seems. It's not what it used to be. It's probably not what it set out to be. But the fact that you pointed out that your group grass is like not that, that's good, because once you cross that line, you have all these things that you can and can't do, and it people don't mean always to change negatively when they create an organization and they're looking to do good things, but inevitably when like the state starts being like involved in they're going to put roadblocks up in terms of what you can and can't do. That's just like always gonna happen. But it's funny that there's so many people that are really against big changes in terms of how society operates, like people who are super against like anarchism and stuff, and think that who would do this, who would do that. But we have all of these examples of when like community does come together and like helps each other way more than like the systems that are set up. Like we do have all these like state created safety nets set up, but they're not like, so many people have problems with them or can't get what they need out of them, that like is well, oh, we won't have that. But does that even work? Half the time I don't even think that there's so much money pumped into those things, and then people still fall through the cracks and don't get what they need or get harmed even more. um and of course, individual people, like we can't always get the resources that we need to help each other because we're just people. But it just stinks that there's so much like money and focus put on these organizations that are stuck in these systems of like not being able to do as much good work as they could, and then not a lot goes to like the actual people. But it has been really cool to see throughout the pandemic how much mutual aid has increased, and people just understanding that concept, and the concept of people coming together to a lot of people coming together to support one person or one family. That if you use the internet to help crowdfund and you get a bunch of people to donate just a couple of dollars, there's been families here and around the country where it's like a family that went through a really traumatic event, or a single mother of a few kids that's really struggling. We want to pay off her house for her or whatever, and uh, give a week to do it, and it gets done. And nobody donated thousands of dollars to it. It was just a lot of people put in $5, $20, and the goal was reached. The people are really, really powerful, and we can help each other, and we can do really big, great things. We just have to remember that we can, and not like leave it to the government or whoever to do.
Well, that's why I think examples of like what you did,
Mm-hmm.
with Harvey are really beautiful to put out there as they're living examples
Mm-hmm.
of like, this happened in this situation. No, it may not always be the same in your situation or your city. And that's what we try to do with grass, is try to make like a template of like, you could start this too, or you can have your own version of mutual aid in your city where um, maybe you're not like addressing every single need,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a way that you can be a support system for certain aspects of the community that really need support that the government really isn't focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's amazing. It's amazing to have this conversation with you. And I'm really hopeful that people also look into what Dan Johnson said on my podcast I think it was a couple podcasts ago. Dan talked about a new project that he's working on that's like on the ground mutual aid,
Mm-hmm.
uh, conflict resolution. Um, there's some really good stuff there, and he's acquiring all this like data from uh, different uh, practices that have worked in different communities, and
Mm-hmm.
like there's like long-term studies that he's gathering, and then putting kind of a portfolio together of like of actions and ways that people can like almost like activist training and
Mm-hmm.
mutual aid training. So that's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've talked to him about that, but that's
No.
he's really on it right now, and I think it's something to support.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely in the background right now. It's not front facing at this point, but he's working really hard at it, and maybe watching the podcast that he explains a little bit better than I could
Mm-hmm.
transcribe it from that. Um, but yeah, I really truly believe that this is the future of activism, is really
Yeah.
like figuring out our own lines of communication. You know, we got Telegram, we got different ways, and I don't know how other people feel about Signal or like whatever.
Uh-huh.
But there's there's these lines of communication that we can have where we can um, really get to the meat of what's going on and um, address things on a communal level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's going to have to be the way that we support each other as like, you know, whatever is going to come through.
Yeah, I think that's always important, but it seems like it's most important now than it has been in quite a while to focus on those things and be prepared and to find your peace in stuff like that. You know, we really have no idea what's going to happen next. Hopefully, it's not as bad as some people might be thinking it could get. But, you know, even if you don't experience anything super crazy in the future, other people are always going to be going through stuff that you could help them with. So it's always good to, I think, be prepared to be involved in um, sometimes, like if you call it like directly mutual aid or whatever, just in those systems of where you can play a part helping other people and just creating like a something that exists different than the rest of society. Did you watch that YouTube video that came out a few weeks ago that like everybody started sharing about mass psychosis, the one that's like
Yeah.
written, and it talks about in there, I think more towards the end, about like creating communities that exist within like a tyrannical system or whatever. That's like
Yeah.
the best way to counter that kind of stuff, rather than like kind of fighting it head on, is just like existing,
Yes.
having a counterculture exist. And it's not good, that's not easy. um and you, people who do that will probably be targeted by all kinds of people, but I mean, I would rather live like that than than not, probably. But like things like mutual aid, like that's a big piece of that. Like people, to get to a place where we're able to um exist and live outside of the current systems and expectations of right now, like we're going to have to support each other. It's not, it's kind of like right when we first started talking, that jump that you have to make to get out of like a normal life into more of an activist lifestyle. It's not easy. So people are going to need support to get there, like whatever.
Or it may not be specifically, and I mean, you could, labels are labels. Like I would say, like for artists too, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of artists and people that organize festivals or people that are involved in festivals that are really changing the narrative, or they're more on a spiritual trajectory and they're offering their spiritual services. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these different people that are genuine people that are working outside the system of
Yeah.
like just running the hamster wheel and working 9 to 5 and that whole trek. And people are really waking up when they're getting out of that. And this is part of me going to Dominica, was for me to take a break from the US so I can just like really breathe and feel what it is to actually be outside of all that madness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have the opportunity to do that, I 150%
Mm-hmm.
would recommend people to do that so they can experience what it's like just to have a break for a second.
Yeah.
Not like a normal vacation where you're
Yes.
like, You know what I mean? Like you're getting drunk, you're going off to Florida or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
not that
Um,
good.
but a real break, like
Yeah.
a real like centering into oneself. Like, what am I here to do? How can I reorganize my life to address the current climate of things? And um, I just really like I want to I want to voice that for anybody listening, and just like, you know, if you if you're feeling that for yourself, here's your call to do
Yeah.
it.
Yep. You know, going back to me giving like a bit of my story, I don't think I used it fully for that, but I that's probably like the best thing that came out of me going to Uganda, especially the first time that I went, being um sometime in the middle of college. So I was young and I was alone. So it was like a huge different thing. I mean, it's it's a totally different place, and then to not have people with you to help with things too. It was like a completely different change of pace and perspective on everything, and to just be immersed in that and then come back. I'm sure that that influenced me in ways that I can't trace back now. Just having that break and seeing a completely different way that people are living and acting, like without the filter of like the media doing it for me, or like a little glimpse of something on social media or whatever. It was like I got to do it. I got to meet all kinds of people and learn about the way that they live, and then talk about the way that things are where I'm from, and talk about it in a much different way I ever would have before, because normally I'm talking to people who are also living it, and so their experience is like mine. And to just the thing, I remember having all these just funny conversations about like the concept of going into debt and all these things that were
Wow.
like it was really interesting. But I maybe I haven't thought about it in that way so much before, as like a good break that I took from life here to kind of shift my
Mm.
perspective and to be able to reflect and maybe look at like the bigger picture of the way humans are. Kind of until you mentioned about your experience right now. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. I'm really grateful for what we've shared, and I'm really excited for people's perspectives to shift, and just to be able to experience what the stories that you have shared. Um, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me to chat. It was nice to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, tune in and find the others. We found another human. Uh, just quickly, what are ways that people can view your work?
If you want to see photojournalism stuff, especially stuff that happened over the summer here in the Twin Cities, my website is my name. So it's emmasron.com, EMMASRON.com. Um, there's far too many photos there, so that should be fun to look through if anybody wants to. There's also some photos of like going up to line 3, the pipeline thing in there, and handful of other stuff. And I don't know, I do a lot of different things in a lot of different places. So maybe the best thing is if anybody's on Twitter to follow me there. Um, I'm by my elf on Twitter, like by myself, but elf instead of self. So
Okay.
BYMYELF.
Nice. And we'll put that in the description below. So
Okay.
people that are watching right now are probably
It'll
being
be
able
in the
to see
description.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Time.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. Everybody, love you. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Bye.